Hello, welcome to another episode of Get the Gist podcast, where we dive into the latest trends, innovations, and challenges across industries. I'm your host, Ruben Fukan, the co founder and CEO of Good Gist, where we enable businesses with AI assistant to automate email and document processing workflows. Today, my special guest is James Polanco. Very recently, James was the director of operations at FDH Aero. James is a highly motivated and results driven leader with 15 years of world class operations experience. He is passionate about driving global business strategy and excel at building high performance teams. James has had successes internationally and domestically at both the corporate and local level with cross-functional expansions, multi-site manufacturing facilities, and fast-paced operations. He has a unique ability to motivate teams using OKRs, lean methodologies, and driving the continuous improvement culturally across organizations. So, James, it's great to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the introduction. Well said.
So let's start with that you had a very diverse career path, right? So you have worked across industry giants like Amazon and Samsung, right? And then very recently at FDH Aero, and you have driven operational excellence in aerospace and defense supply chain management. So let's start with that, right? So from a company like Amazon and Samsung into the aerospace sector, how would you compare your experience in e-commerce and consumer electronics versus in the
Yeah,
defense?
so it's been an interesting journey because I actually started in aerospace with an aerospace contract manufacturer. So there I was very quickly rose up. I had 7 manufacturing facilities between California, Colorado, and Mexico. We did about 90% of our manufacturing in Mexico. So I was spending a lot of time in northern Mexico, standing up those buildings, making sure that the operation was fully set. I got my Six Sigma black belt. I got my master's in with an emphasis in international business. It's an MBA with an emphasis in international business. Shortly thereafter, Amazon came by, made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Started, running their first sort center on the west coast of the United States. Did really well with that. I ran actually the very first Sunday delivery in Amazon history. So did really well with that. Had the opportunity to go to Atlanta and train the operations team as for the first sort center in Georgia. Did that, rubbed shoulders with the right people, the right questions. They immediately flew me to Seattle. A week later, I was launching the sites. Did that for a few years. Then I switched to Samsung, and I oversaw after about 3 or 4 years, I oversaw 13 different distribution centers across the Samsung network. So it meant 13 different general managers reported up to me. And it's at this stage of my career, it's not about product or service. I'm a leader of leaders, and it's just driving that team, keeping people motivated, training folks, training leaders to know what to look for. And so at Samsung, it was home appliance and consumer electronics. At Amazon sells A to Z. So product is irrelevant. So going back to aerospace at FDH, it's not about what products we're selling, but it's about leading the team.
That's a great point. So let me ask you from that perspective, right? So what are some of the similarities or differences that you see in while leading teams, right, in the supply chain world? Because again, the supply chain domain is going through constant disruptions. I mean, there are regulatory complexities, increasing demand for agility, right? So, as you are grooming leaders across different organizations, right, across the Samsung and across Amazon and FDH Aero, do you do you see, or do you use a different methodology, or a different approach, because these are very diverse industries, but of course all on the supply chain side of things?
Yeah, so it's different groups, different teams are going to have different perspectives. And just like at Samsung, it's a very strong Korean culture. And so it's a very different perspective than in Amazon, where everybody at Amazon, well, when I joined Amazon, Amazon was such a new company that they're bringing a ton of different people from different industries. Amazon said had a philosophy that I don't care where you came from. Somebody thought that you were good enough to be here, but this is how we're going to do it here. Whereas at Samsung, it's the culture is Korean. You have to adjust to this. So that becomes a challenge. It's how do I get them to see my perspective, drive that culture shift while still adhering to that culture. And alternatively, in aerospace, it's this is a 100-year-old industry. The industry people in the industry are very set to their ways, and it's now about leading leaders to be able to tweak or adjust their habits to make sure that we're all firing our arrows in the right direction. Historically, organizations work in silos, and everybody's shooting their arrows at each other. So my objective is no. How do we stop pointing fingers at each other to work as one team and start pointing our arrows in the same direction? We're trying to come up with the exact same goal. There's no reason why I should be my operations team is pointing at sales and sales is pointing at operations because every
Right.
company does that.
Yep.
So that's kind of my challenge where it's getting the organization to think as one team.
Yeah. And so in that process, right, because one of the key challenges when we talk to a lot of our customers that we see is alignment of leaders, right, across the organization. And when it comes to topics like technology adoption, right, and I mean, across all these three companies at a high level, they are all technology focused companies, right, and of course with different strengths. So how have you seen that process, and in terms of getting alignment of leaders, and when it comes to adopting new technologies, right? So how does that process work?
So it's a bit of a challenge when leaders are not convinced of the technology. As we were speaking earlier, the technology AI it's still in its infancy and it will get better. Right now it's at Windows 95 level and it will get better, but it's not there yet. So it's bridging the technology with the human side of the operation because right now AI is only as good as the people that are using it. And if the people are not trained in how to use it or what it can do or what the future trajectory of it is, then it's called kind of a no point. You can't invest in the technology if you're not investing in your people. And if you can do both of them, now you're setting yourself up for success. My challenge is what I've seen is that too many leaders rely solely on the technology and they don't invest in their teams on the people side of it. You invest into a robot, it's never going to call in sick, it's never going to call in late, it's never going to get tired, hungry. But you can't just do that. There is the people side of the operation. And by integrating the two, I think that's the golden ticket. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing industry wide right now. It's several leaders just, well, we bought this, ERP system. We bought this system. Just use that. It's like, no, it's train the people on how to make sure that they know how to use that.
And you make a very valid point that yes, you cannot run an organization without people, and people is very important. And as technology is changing, it's very important to make sure that people understand the value of the technology, and they are appropriately trained to use that technology. So, on that note, I mean, there is a growing, I would say, a skill crisis that is happening, right? Because at the pace at which technology is moving, a lot of technical knowledge that has been acquired over years and decades have become obsolete faster than people are able to learn and assimilate everything that is happening, right? So how do you see that skill development process emerging or keeping pace with all these changes, right? So how can organizations adapt to those kind of changes?
So it's funny that you mentioned the changes because there's always been changes in business. When I first got into the workforce in aerospace, we had a whole drafting department. Drafters have been replaced by AutoCAD. So it's one step right after another. Today, accountants are going to be replaced by accountants that use AI. So it's not a matter of replacing the people or the workforce, but it's about including it and giving yourself that edge to continue driving. In 100 years, I don't know if managers will exist. Will they be replaced by AI? I don't know. But it's those good managers, the good leadership that works with AI so that they can learn those processes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now let's talk about regulations, right? And especially say FDH Aero is a defense industry, and then of course that's pretty highly regulated. And in general, the whole supply chain industry is going through a lot of changes because of geopolitical regions or even otherwise, right? So pandemic had completely disrupted
Environmental
things, right?
factors, yeah.
Environmental factors. So to basically navigate around this constant change, right? And in terms of the different dynamics that are involved, because it's not just that you're planning the business, you have to coordinate seamlessly between suppliers, manufacturers, customers, right? And making sure that all the moving pieces fall in together. Uh, and which, I mean, a lot of people don't realize is that at the ground level, how challenging that environment is, right? So how do you see organizations navigate around that, and what is the role that technology is playing in helping organizations navigate a challenging environment like?
So again, going back to my earlier point, the technology is great, but if you don't have that leadership buy-in and the team framework, that we're not going to be shooting our arrows at each other. Because just like when the very first time I walked the Samsung CEO through one of my warehouses, last question he asked me, he's like, "What challenges do you have?" I'm like, "Well, forecast accuracy." And he's like, "Yeah, I deal with that every day. Forecast accuracy is always going to be a problem." And to that point, there's always going to be problems in any supply chain and any issue. It's how does your team overcome that? Is it just an organization that's beating each other up, or are they constructively using these technologies to help navigate these challenges? And as you mentioned, we had global pandemics a few years ago. Nobody saw that coming. So it's what do you have to do? And I was deep at Samsung when that was happening. What do you have to do? How do you adjust? Don't spend your time arguing with other leadership, but focus on what's at hand. What do we need to do to make this work? Because in 2020, global supply chains could not stop. It was a challenge, but you have to figure it out. There was, whether it's going all the way through to the Panama Canals when they get stuck, you still have to figure out how to make that work. What extra challenges? And so working in operations, it's a chaotic industry, whether it's in B2B, B2C, direct wholesale, distribution, sort centers, it's managing the teams. And how do you overcome what those challenges? Because I don't care if you're in the financial industry, if you're in the distribution industry, automotive, we're all facing the same challenges. Just like a doctor or a therapist will find problems for a living, as a manager, as a leader, you solve problems for a living. So it's about being able to, as you mentioned, quickly adapt, be agile, and change with the requirements of the environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that topic of how leaders, how people can make that difference, right? And given that you have worked across multiple organizations and very big organizations, which deal with huge amount of supply chain and operational challenges. So what are some of the examples that you have seen where people made all the difference in terms of solving a crisis or averting a crisis, because I'm sure that there are like probably tons of stories, because that is what operations is every day is a challenge, every day is a constant struggle in terms of problem solving. But what are some of the big
So, so
stories
the
that
you
comes to your mind?
one of the specific operations or launches that I've experienced and challenges is when I was at Amazon. Amazon timelines were super strict, super short, and you had to do the impossible in an impossible amount of time. And I remember one time in Boston, this was November 24th, 2014. It was snowing outside, cold as ever. I'm from Southern California, so I don't do well with the snow. But of course, just like every tight timeline that Amazon gives you, it's the people that make it happen. And then when it comes down to when, you know, stuff hits the fan and things don't go well, you have to rely on your people to still stay there, make it happen, hold your composure, focus on the goal. And in this particular instance, we had about 350 associates walking in the building for their first day of work. Behind me, they're still welding the conveyors together. And so myself and two other project managers are standing there as human weld shields, weld curtains, just to protect the associates. Eventually, they stopped the welding. We turned the conveyors on. Half of them didn't turn on. So it's like, what do we do? We can't just tell 350 people to go home. So I got a whiteboard. I got the general manager of the facility. I'm like, here's your plan A, B, C, D, and E. We exhausted all of them. We ended up having to move the inbound traders to the outbound side of the building, run the conveyors backwards. But it's that person side of it, that leadership side of it, that you don't just throw up your hands and walk away, but okay, what do you have to do? Just like any army in the world, you have a plan, you go execute the plan, something is going to go wrong along the way. You don't throw out your whole plan, you make adjustments, figure out what you need to do to make it happen. And I think that's in any industry, any organization, any team. You're going to have problems. But at the end of the day, it's leadership that's going to pull you out of there, not the technology.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a great point that you make, because um, I think as leaders, people expect that okay, you are kind of just managing people, which is of course one part of it, but a bigger role as a leader that you have is that of a problem solver, right? Because people would ultimately turn to the leader when there are problems, and there will be problems, to come up with solutions. So that's an amazing point that you made, right? So one of the key aspects, right, when it comes to especially supply chain and companies like Amazon and others who are moving to faster and faster delivery, right? So then there is that challenge of how do you balance between speed and efficiency, as well as still manage a sustainability in the business, right? Or ensure that it's environmentally friendly.
Yeah, so it's definitely a trade-off. I mean, it's a sliding scale. You can go really fast and, very poorly sustainable, or you can go very slow, super, and it has to be a sliding scale. It's Amazon has a really good thought process, and I think Amazon does this really well. It's that everything Amazon does starts and ends with the customer. So the first question you're asking yourself is, how does this impact the customer? And then work your way back. I remember being in an engineering summit in Seattle with Amazon, and at the time, delivery was 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. Send in your UPC, you'll get it 4 to 6 weeks. And at the time, I think this was 2013, they said, no, we want to get it to you within an hour. It's crazy. I don't know how we're going to do that. But they have a core leadership trait called think big. And it's you think as big as you can and then work your way back. How do you get that? And then you sprinkle in sustainability in between. But it's setting that goal and just walking back. Just like if I can give you the analogy of the mazes that we used to do as kids on the back of a cereal box.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's and I know that it's we're gonna solve it by going backwards. You don't start and make all these and retrace. You start at the end. What do we have to do? And that's kind of the philosophy that Amazon takes, which I think is great. As an alternative, Samsung South Korea does not want to invest in North America. So they outsource everything and they'll add, 20,000 square feet here, 15,000 square feet here as we need it. Amazon did the exact opposite. They weren't making a profit, but this is where we're going. This is why we have to reinvest everything into the leadership teams and into the company. We don't care about profit at this point because when we hit critical scale, profits are going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
So there are two very specific but different philosophies in how you make it work.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's very interesting to see how organizations take like completely diagonally opposite approaches, and they're still doing great, right? So, I mean, I think it's all about the process and execution with that philosophy. So, let me take a completely different topic, which is something that you follow and is part of your leadership style, which is the OKRs, right? Now, OKR is, I mean, there are a lot of companies following OKRs, right? But the right way of OKR is not being, I mean, there are very few companies who are able to really work with OKR in the right approach, right? And basically build teams who are highly functioning, highly performant with the OKR based approach, right? So, from your perspective and for the benefit of the audience, right, can you explain how the OKR system works and what is the right way of looking at OKR and making it
Yeah,
work?
so a lot of leaders focus on tangible results directly in the P&L. OKRs, what it does is it's more qualitative than quantitative in that respect. So you can still measure things from a qualitative perspective. And just for the audience, OKRs are objectives and key results. So you set your objective, and then you have milestones all along the way. If that milestone is train 30% of your team, then you can measure that. That's something you can quantify. But is that a direct correlation to the P&L? No. And so it's kind of bridging the gap between qualitative and quantitative and getting your teams to kind of fully understand that and capture that. It definitely helps drive the quantitative measurement behind it.
Yeah. Okay. And so, is it more of a complementary framework where you complement it with a quantitative framework, or is it a standalone framework in itself?
It's kind of it's definitely you have to do both of them, right?
Hmm.
You're
Yeah.
doing the qualitative and the quantitative. But I cannot sit and talk to a board of directors saying that, hey, it's not reflective on my P&L yet, but wait 3 months. No, but what I can tell them is that, hey, it hasn't reflected on the P&L yet, but these are our objectives that we've been hitting. These are our key milestones. Are we on track? Are we off track? I can't tell my CEO. I'm like, just believe me, it'll happen in a year. We'll make it work in a year. It's that framework, bridging the gap between the qualitative results and the quantitative results and the qualitative objective.
That's a great point. So, in terms of the evolution that you are seeing in that industry, right? And in terms of the changes in the people management approaches that you are seeing, and especially so in today's world where there is a lot of concern about AI, right? So, how would AI impact organizations? How would AI change jobs, right? Is AI going to take away jobs from people, right? So, it brings a lot of fear in people, right? So, what would be your advice to leaders in organization in how to navigate this significant shift that we are seeing today, right? Which is not a gradual technology evolution; it's almost like an industrial revolution kind of a shift that we are seeing.
Absolutely. And you can take this back as far as the when we went from making wagons to cars. Wagon repairmen that didn't switch to cars eventually found themselves out of the business. Going up to the internet. If accountants that didn't adopt the internet usually lost to accountants that adopted the internet. As we mentioned earlier, drafters that didn't learn AutoCAD eventually lost their drafting positions. Managers that use AI are eventually going to replace managers that don't use AI. And just wholeheartedly, that's, as I mentioned, AI is still in its infancy, but if you don't adopt it, you don't embrace it, you don't pick it up, you don't learn with it, then the industry is just going to fly right past you, and then you're going to be the person that's still using a typewriter, and it's not something that we get to choose. AI is here. It's not going away. Just like the a lot of people when the internet came out and they said it was a fad, I'm not adopting it. Okay, don't adopt it. But eventually you're going to be left behind. So AI is we're at that precipice where you have your naysayers and then you have the people embracing AI. And it's not going to happen in 1 year, it's not going to happen in 2 years. But in 10 years, if you didn't adopt it now, then you're going to be putting yourself in a bad position.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, I think there is, I mean, fear is definitely the first reaction whenever there is a relatively less known things that comes and we don't know what the future holds. But I think it's more important to, rather than resist that change, to embrace that change and figure out how to work with it rather than against it, right? Um, so, I mean, as we come to the end of our podcast, my final question to you is: What are you personal excited? What are you excited about personally, right? And what is your next uh, path ahead, right? That you are looking really forward to.
Yeah, so as a global leader, my next step is just, to hone my skills in AI, how I can bridge the gaps. Based on my experience, I know there's gaps in forecast accuracy. I know there's gaps in supply chain planning, whether it's an S and OP or SIOP. There's still a lot of challenges there that AI can help with. Um, but again, you can't, as a leader, as a manager, you can't just say, we have AI, we're going to win. No, it's how do you train the teams to use the AI to help win? So that's kind of my focus is where along either the supply chain, the distribution chain, the leadership team, the management team, where can I start to integrate this with my team? It's not a transaction. It's not something I bought a toaster. Now we're going to make perfect toast. If your people don't know how to use that toaster correctly, it's irrelevant. So I'm keeping abreast of those changes. I'm embracing AI. It's not something that's going away, but it's how do we make ourselves better using this new technology?
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot, James. It has been a fascinating talking to you. And thanks for sharing the unique perspective, right? Because a lot of technology conversations that we have focus on only the business aspects and how technology can impact the business. I think the people aspect is being not talked about as much. So, really, thank you for bringing that perspective and sharing your insights on that.
I definitely enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to maybe we can do another one of these in the future.
Absolutely. I really look forward to that. So, thanks everyone for listening in, and I'll look forward to having all of you back in the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.